Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about the origin of VATS in Fallout. And I'll start by saying we didn't call it VATS in Fallout 1 and 2. That's a Fallout 3 term, but it's just what everybody calls it now. And this is me answering a question from Vladimir in Germany, who asks, I always wondered how this feature that was later known as VATS came to be. Where did it come from? What problem did you try to solve? What benefit did it give to the player? This is a good question. I really like this question because it's an example of a question that in a million years it wouldn't have occurred to me to do a video on because I kind of thought people knew this. And then I remember like how much about the nitty gritty and history of Fallout that while it may have been mentioned somewhere in an interview 20 years ago, a lot of people just don't know today. So I'll try to go through and answer all of Vladimir's questions in detail. First of all, where did it come from? If you didn't know, Fallout was originally going to be a GURPS product, meaning it was going to use GURPS, the role playing game, as its system. We switched over before it shipped about probably in February, and it shipped in October. So 8 months before it shipped, we switched over to Special. Now, GURPS had a feature called Called Shots that let you aim at a part of an enemy and at a risk of a penalty to hit that area, or if they were more heavily armored in that area, a different DR, damage resistance, or damage threshold, depending on where you were hitting, at the advantage, potential advantage of either doing more damage or causing an effect. Now, the GURPS code, the GURPS combat code in Fallout was written very modularly. Modularly. It was written in modules. How do I know that? I wrote it. Before we even were doing Fallout, I had made a GURPS character creator that ran just as its own application, and it had a lot of modules that were external text files that you could read in, so you could say, hey, I want these advantages and these disadvantages and these skills, and this is the tech level, and all this stuff you could do. When I started making Fallout, I wrote the combat code the exact same way. The game was kept separate from the game mechanics. And the game mechanics were GURPS. It was this set of skills and these rules for how they were used. But that's not how combat worked. Combat was a turn-based combat engine that when it needed to know how far can I move, what actions are legal, if I use this weapon on this person, what's my chance to hit, and how much damage will I do and what effects will I have. Those were calls from the game into the game mechanics, the modules supporting the game mechanics. So when we switched from GURPS to Special, I extracted all those GURPS modules and just put them somewhere else. That meant we had to make our own system. And we did traits and skills and perks. When we did all that, I wanted to keep the called shot system because even though our sprites were 2D, they were made as 3D models and then extracted into game data as sprites. So basically, they were rendered walking in all 8 directions, in some of them 4. No, we didn't do reflection until Arcanum. So we did, I don't know, it's only 6 because it's GURPS, Fallout was in hexes. So we would render these models out walking and doing their actions as 2D sprites, but we had 3D models. And in our Called Shot UI, we had this really cool thing where we'd wireframe the model and then point to different parts of it as places you could shoot. I wanted to keep that. So as part of the new special system, we allowed Called Shots. So that's where it came from. It came from GURPS. What problem were we trying to solve with it? We wanted to keep Called Shots because A, it made combat more tactical and more interesting, but it also allowed us to differentiate weapons and armor from each other because we had armor that protected you better in some areas. We had weapons that had different bonuses and penalties for shooting in different areas. So these are things that we wanted to keep. And also there were traits and skills and perks that we wanted to leave open the possibility of those affecting called shots, because it made an interesting character to have someone who I don't hit as often, but when I do, I get more criticals. Or I believe there was a trait that said you don't get called shots. You get more action points, but you can't do called shots. Okay. That's an interesting thing to put in the game. Called shots, therefore, so that the problem we were trying to solve is how can we make weapons and armor and creatures and perks and skills and traits have more differentiation and more things that they provide as tactical decisions for a player to make in combat. And then finally, what benefit it did give to the player. The clever player, when playing Fallout, will take advantage of all these differences. And when fighting a particular type of enemy, will either start doing called shots in different locations or switch weapon types altogether, knowing that this isn't very good against this type of enemy. And we wanted that in there so that if you were just wanted to play the game brute force and not think about those things, it was possible. But did the game get easier if you took those things to advantage? Yes. For example, the BB gun really was great for shooting people in the eye. That was the whole point of it. But one thing that I didn't realize that just came out of how the numbers worked after we put the game together was one of the producers discovered that you could punch a lot of people in the head, and it not only there was less of a chance of hitting them, but when you did hit them, it tended to knock them down or knock them out a lot. So one thing he discovered was if you upped your unarmed skill really high, you could go up and punch people in the face, and you would often knock them down or knock them out. And that worked on robots too. He thought it was so funny. He said, he called it the glass jaw phenomenon. And he said, I was surprised to find out how many robots had glass jaws. Like these robots that were ripping through him normally, he would just run up and punch them in the face. And I'm like, this is great. I didn't take that out because what I loved about that was the idea that a player will feel clever because he is being clever and find some advantage like that in the game. I love. So while there's a lot of things in the game that bring that dimension of discovery, called shots did it in a great way because while they were a penalty to hit, they often increased your chance of doing a critical, and they added effects to what the critical would be. So hitting someone in the eye greatly increased your chance of blinding them. Hitting them in the head knocked them out. Hitting them in the leg crippled the leg. So while you had a chance of doing that randomly, if you hit them without using a called shot, you had a much, much higher chance of doing it specifically with a called shot. And that made sense. And of course, since it's an isometric game, we didn't really have the option to let people aim at body parts the same way it would be if it was a first-person game. So, thanks, Windows. So, this is something that I thought called shots added a great deal to the game, which is why I never wanted to lose them. So, I hope, Vladimir, that this answers your question on where called shots came from, what we were trying to do with it, and what benefit we thought it gave to players.